Our guest today owns over $13 million of real estate in some of America's hottest markets. And he did that after spending his 20s and 30s making less than minimum wage as an overseas missionary.
We made $9.20 an hour.
So what is Brian Tibbs' secret?
People listening to this are going to say, I'm not willing to do that. Okay, that's fine. I'm just telling you how you can build a multi-million-dollar net worth, even if you have limited income.
So in this episode, Brian actually breaks down what he calls the hacker method. It's a step-by-step strategy for building wealth. From the H,
house hacking is essentially just taking your primary residence and converting it into an income generator.
To the 4 R's. We also dive into Brian's short-term rental strategy, the 50-40-10 money management system he used to invest on such a low income, the morality of wealth building, and so much more. And by the way, on this episode, I did something kind of different. I actually brought in one of my close friends, Cam Cathcart, who was on episode 8 of the podcast, to actually be a guest co-host with me for this episode. So without further ado, here's a conversation with real estate investor Brian Tibbs. Brian Tibbs, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Yeah, how many times have you been to Maui now in the last few years? A few times, right?
Well, Brandon has brought me 3 times.
This is true.
And I was at Kona one other time before that.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm glad to have you here, man. So I know you as a real estate investor. Obviously, you're in some open door capital stuff, but you're also an active real estate investor yourself. But I also knew you were a former missionary.
Yep.
I knew you lived on the Amazon River. I want to hear about that at some point. And I know you are an author. You got a new book. It's called The Hacker Method from Mr. Brian Tibbs. I'm super excited to talk about that today. So that's who you are today, but take us back before all that. Who was Mr. Brian Tibbs?
Well, when I was a teenager, I overheard my father and my grandfather talking about buying a duplex. And I thought that they were insane. I was 17 years old, or maybe 16 years old, totally self-absorbed, right? Like no other teenager ever has.
Yeah,
been,
no,
right?
they're all good.
And I heard them talking about this, and I was just kind of sitting on the floor, and I was trying to make sure that they didn't know I was listening. And I just thought they were crazy. They were talking about clogged toilets, and they were talking about renters not paying their rent, and talking about a mortgage payment and $10,000 in repairs and all this stuff. And I just thought, why in the world would you do something like that? So I finally kind of like snapped out of the listening mode, and I said, listen, you guys are making a terrible mistake. Why would you do this? And for like an hour, they tried to explain to me, and I could kind of see in their eyes that, okay, now we've got a new challenge. We've got this teenager that hasn't engaged with the family all weekend, and now we're going to teach him a life lesson. And that was the first time I remember ever hearing about real estate or anything like that. And after probably an hour or maybe even 2, they kindly won me over. And so at the age of 16 or 17 or whatever, that was when I decided that I wanted to be a real estate investor.
Wow.
Then I went to college, majored in business, bought my first duplex when I was 19 years old.
How'd you buy that?
Well, I bought it from the builder. It was 1996, so there was the liar loans at that time, right?
Yeah.
So
Just write whatever you want.
So I actually worked for my dad, and so he just paid me a little bit more money for a couple of months, and then I went shopping for a house, and then I was able to buy it. So, but I bought it for 3% down or something like that. It was like $2,500 out of my pocket, and then I got a duplex. Then the next year, I decided, okay, I'm going to buy at least 1 unit a year. Forever was my plan, right? So the next year I bought another duplex, and then the next year after that I bought another duplex, and then the year after that I bought a 4-plex. So by the time I was 23 or 4, I had 10 units. Wow, and I was dating this lovely young lady named Jill Bramhall. And during that time, I met her at church, and during that time, I started to feel like God was calling me to do something different than business. And, all the way back to when I was 17, I'm a businessman, and everybody knows me to be that, and everybody knows that I'm going to be investing in real estate and all that kind of stuff. And I started to feel this nagging tug that God wanted me to be a missionary. And I was like, that's insane. And I remember even saying once, that would be the worst misallocation of resources ever, right? Like, who would say something like that, right? Well, I finally came to the conclusion that was what I was supposed to do. And I remember Jill and I went out on a date. It was after church, and I was really quiet, and she thought I was upset with her. And what was really going on in my mind is I thought, this relationship's going to end. I'm going to lose my business because I don't know if I'm going to go to study somewhere or move to some country and start speaking like some language like that, right? And
that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's exactly what I said is welcome to Maui.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so anyway, I finally broke down and told her, and I said, listen, I think that God's calling me to be a missionary, and so I don't know what that means, and so I don't know if I'm going to move somewhere or whatever. I was like, okay, this is it. And she said, well, that's funny. I've always had that calling as well. Really? So instead of breaking up, we ended up getting married just a few months later. A year after we got married, we moved to Guatemala without ever having been to Guatemala. So I had 2 suitcases, Jill had 2 suitcases, and away we went.
Wow. Why Guatemala?
We were working with a church, and that's a place that they had an assignment for volunteers that had no experience and no training and so we just went there and we just were volunteers for a year.
Did you have to fundraise for that year, or did you use your own income off of the duplexes?
Yeah, we just sold some of the real estate, and I was just trying to be obedient, and so sold some of the real estate, and we just basically lived off that. So we didn't raise any money and didn't get any pay, and just lived real cheap. And
how do you, I want to go back just a second.
Yeah.
How do you feel like you hear the voice, or maybe you could call it the direction of the calling from God? Like, how does that manifest itself in your life?
That's a very good question. And I'm always careful to say that it's not like I hear a voice in the clouds every day, right? At that time, I just really was hearing something. I attribute it to God. And I really struggle when people say, God told me this, God told me that, because the conversation's over, right? Like, what are you going to say?
Yep.
And so the way I can say it is I just really had a strong conviction that was what I was supposed to do. And I couldn't shake it. Like, I couldn't excuse it away. I couldn't get rid of it. And so I finally was like, well, okay, I know the right thing to do. And so this is what we're going to do. That's
great. Yeah, I have the same problem when, like, I never want to say, like, God told me, because I don't hear voices in my head.
Right.
It's maybe a strong conviction, but then I'm also been strongly convicted to go eat ice cream because it's in the fridge, and I'm like,
but it's a different conviction, right?
Yeah, like so I want to be, and I think people often confuse, desire for the voice of God. Like, oh, God told me to, like, I never like to say God told me to move to Maui.
Right.
Like, what first world, like, pretentious. That said, like, when I tried to move to Denver years ago, we tried very hard to move to Denver, and it was like every door was shut.
Yeah.
Every single door. And including, I went to this, like, conference, and the person speaking was like, listen, to everyone out there, there's 1,000 people in the room. Like, God has you exactly where he wants you. He is saying, do not go. Yeah. And it was like, that was like the final nail in the coffin. I was like, all right, like, I know maybe it wasn't to me, but it sure was more confirmation on this, like, door shutting continually. Then 2 years later, I had the idea, like, what if I moved to Maui or, Hawaii? It was Hawaii in general. And then every door just opened one after another after another. Right. So did God tell me to move to Maui? No.
Right.
But I do believe I wanted to move to Maui, and God's like, okay, let's make that work. But he knew Denver was not going to be good for me. Yeah. Because I would have run across Cam. Probably
it was there, man. Open door Capital would not be around.
It would not be around. So, like, for whatever reason, like, he allowed me to come here. So it's a hard thing. It drives me nuts when people are like, God told me this. Because I'm like, did he?
Yeah.
Especially when it really serves them.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Well, this was not serving.
Correct. This is a negative move in life, which is probably more likely it's God.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Which sounds weird, but, like, it's a good way to distinguish, maybe.
Can you talk me through, and this is something I'm always interested in. So you're 23, 24 at this time?
Well, when we got married when I was 27, and then moved when we were 28.
Okay, so at this time you've been building your real estate business for a while.
Yeah.
And I just want to know the internal battle that you had with God, where it's like, God, I'm doing amazing things for the kingdom. Like, you talk about, like, the parable of the talents, where it's like, hey, I am multiplying things. I'm crushing it. Like, I'm in my zone.
That was the misallocation of resources conversation.
Yeah. Like, I am in my zone right now. Like, I just want to hear the internal battle that you struggled with, or maybe you didn't struggle with it. I know I would.
Oh, I definitely struggled.
Like, what was that like?
It was about a year. From when I first started to feel like this is what I was supposed to do to when I finally said, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? And the whole battle was, I'm going to lose my business, I'm going to lose my real estate, I'm going to lose my girlfriend, I'm going to lose everything I know, I'm going to lose my culture, I'm going to lose everything, right? And so it wasn't a comfortable thing, but when I finally did accept, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, it was almost comical. It was a Sunday, and I was at church, and I was like, okay, fine. Fine, okay, I'll do it. And I just kind of, I left the church, and I went outside, and I just stretched out my arms like a sacrificial Christ or something, right? Fine, you can have it, I'll do it. And when I finally said that, I felt a peace that I've never felt before. Like, I've finally given in, or I've finally given it all, right? Like literally giving it all. And I just felt at peace that was what I was supposed to do. And so then from then until we finished our work in 2021, I didn't look back.
Oh, wow. So how long were you there?
16 years.
Wow. All in Guatemala, or where'd you go?
No, we were only in Guatemala for a year.
Okay.
And then after that, we actually started our own organization, and we moved to Argentina. So the name of the organization was Ardeo Global. And our chore was to seek, train, and send missionaries. We sent 360 missionaries to 11 different countries, planting 96 churches, and doing all sorts of other stuff too, humanitarian aid and community development and marriage counseling and, all that stuff. Taking care of orphans and all that kind of stuff. So we did a lot of stuff in those 16 years. So.
Wow. What was going on with your real estate during that time? Were you still buying anything in the States? Or?
I ended up actually selling 6 of my 10 units when we left. And that was in 2005 and 2006. So great time to sell. And then after the market crashed, we decided, okay, well, let's get back in. So we were sitting on some cash. And so we started going back in very slowly. And because my 100% focus was on the mission, and we would come back to the U.S. for 6 weeks a year or 2 months a year or whatever. And when we'd come back, I'd kind of take a glance at it, sell something, buy something, upgrade, that kind of stuff, and just slowly built back up to 17 units by the time we finished our mission work in 2021.
Yeah. And so for those 16 years, were you living off of kind of your cash flow from those rentals, or did you start having to fundraise?
Yeah. So we fundraised our salary after that first volunteer year.
Okay.
Well, and when we started Ardeo, I didn't take any income. I treated it like a business. When you first start a business, you don't get paid, you pay. And so that's how I treated the nonprofit. But then, we started to fundraise our own salary. And
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of the thing that I like to teach people is that we lived for the 16 years that we were overseas. If you take the total amount of money we received as a W-2 income and divide it into the hours that Jill and I worked in the mission, we made $9.20 an hour.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And we still were able to build a multi-million-dollar net worth over that time period with very limited focus on the real estate side, right? So no, we didn't spend any of our cash flow. We just piled it all back in and just multiplied it.
So this will be a very broad question. I know we can dig into it when we talk about the hacker method. How does someone with limited income build a real estate empire like you did?
You have to live on less than you make, a lot less than you make. So I have 2 sections in the book called the 50-40-10 budget. And what I encourage people to do is hack your lifestyle. That's the first step. The second step is live on 50% of your income, invest 40%, and give 10% away to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Change the world through your generosity is the 10%, right? And so if you can, even if you're making minimum wage, like I did, invest 40% of your take-home pay, and do the other hacks, side hustles and all that other stuff to get your income up as high as you can. You can build a multi-million-dollar net worth in 15 to 20 years. You can.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the first H, that's hack your life.
Hack your lifestyle.
Well, hack your lifestyle. What does that mean?
So that is all the different ways that you can figure out how to increase your income and decrease your living expenses. And I've heard you even say a couple of times that the best way for somebody to get started is a house hack.
Yeah.
That mortgage is killer.
Yeah, it's the biggest expense people
30,
have.
40, 50% of people's take-home pay.
Yeah.
If you can house hack and get that taken care of, there's your investing money right there.
For those who have never heard that term, house hacking, what does that mean?
So house hacking is essentially just taking your primary residence and converting it into an income generator somehow. You can do that all the way from renting out a bay in your garage to parceling off or partitioning off a part of your house and putting a tenant in there. To, a glamping pod in your backyard if you have the right property, right? Yeah. There's people that are renting out their swimming pools, right? For $50 an hour, you can rent out your swimming pool for a kid's party or something, right? So just generating income from your house.
What allowed my wife and I to buy our first house is we rented a house in Denver, and we were paying $1,200 a month for rent. Right. And then there was 4 bedrooms, and we rented out 2 of the bedrooms for $700 a month. And so we were making money renting the house.
Yep.
Wow, yeah.
We did that for a year, and we were able to save up a down payment for a house.
Exactly.
And it was kind of on accident, but it was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did something. I rented an apartment when I was 20 or 19. I rented an apartment. And it was a 4-bedroom apartment. I rented out the 3 bedrooms, lived in one. And then one day I was like, wait, if I rented out my bedroom, I make some cash flow, and like
So you're on the couch.
I lived on the couch, and then I didn't really like my roommates, and so I ended up just sleeping in my car for most of that year.
So people listening to this are going to say,
awesome.
I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah, most people aren't.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm just telling you how you can build a multi-million-dollar net worth,
Yeah.
even if you have limited income.
yeah.
And if you're not willing to do it, okay. So something else that I always say is wealthy people buy luxuries last. You know what? A 2,500 square foot house, that's a luxury.
Yeah.
A brand new car, that's a luxury. Let's get a pool installed, that's a luxury.
Dude, you bring up such a great point. Is we have in America we have moved the luxury line so far over to be like, well, I mean, I have an iPhone and I have a new car and I have a nice house and I live in a good neighborhood, but I don't do anything luxury. And then you look at every other country pretty much on earth, and like the poorest person in America is in luxury.
Yes.
Like it's shocking.
We have a saying, I do short-term rentals, and we have a saying is yesterday's luxury is today's expectation, right? And that's true across the board in our economy, right?
Yeah. So you do short-term rentals. I want to get into that a little bit later, so let's not forget about that. But I want to go back to this idea. Well, let's actually finish up your story of how you came back, and then I want to go into the HACKER. When did you decide you were done? You were like, I'm done missionarying.
Yeah.
I got a new purpose.
Yeah. So I still am on mission.
Okay.
Right. And the thing has shifted a little bit, but my mission now is I want to help people maximize who they are. And a skill set that I have is the wealth building side. And so I'm helping people maximize their wealth building, but I'm still focused on the other pillars. And we'll talk about this a little bit later too, about you need to put people before you put money.
Yeah.
You're going to be miserable if all you care about is building a net worth. All I want is multi-million-dollar net worth. Well, no, do that so that you can elevate your family, so that you can elevate your neighborhood, so that you can elevate your community, right? And then the third pillar is be generous with what you've got. Yeah. And if you can make millions and millions of dollars, you can be really generous and you can make real big impact. And so that's my mission, which isn't a lot different than what we were doing in the field, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
So how did I decide to come back? Our kids were getting older. They're getting into high school age. They'd gone to 5 different schools because we'd moved to 5 different countries. And so we decided, you know what, for their stability, that's one factor. We need to put them in one spot. So we said, okay, we got one move left. Where's it going to be? And just after a lot of conversation with my wife and just kind of the COVID was in the mix of all that. And we just decided, okay, we've done what we're supposed to do. So we're going to move back to the States and settle down a little bit and quit learning new languages and quit going to new countries and and plant roots.
What was that transition like coming back to the States?
That was hard.
Was it?
It was really hard. I mean, it's really good in some ways. Like you can go to Amazon and you can have stuff on your doorstep same day. Maybe not in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But in Phoenix,
it's a few days.
we got factories all over or warehouses and they drop it off same day. You know, just some of that first world stuff that is so convenient, is so nice. But, you know, change in job, change in focus, change in career, change in house, change in everything. It's hard.
Yeah. Can I ask you about your kids? I saw a trend on TikTok a while back, and it was called third culture kids, where they don't fit into the United States culture. They don't fit into the, where you guys were at culture. How have your kids responded coming back?
Yeah, so Jill and I always were aware of that, it's unavoidable from the life that we've lived. They've had such an exposure to so much stuff, from extreme poverty to, extreme wealth too, and just everything in between, in different cultures and different languages, and they think in different languages too, right? They can think in a different language, which is a different culture, which is a complete different mindset, and so they have a hard time often, kids, adjusting either to their host culture or their home culture. So Jill and I set the goal that we always wanted them to thrive, not just survive, but thrive in both cultures. So when we came back to the U.S., we just were really intentional that they would hang out with American kids. And when we were in the field, they always went to national language schools, so Spanish-speaking schools. And yeah, so I think we did okay. I mean, yeah, they're pretty good kids.
That's good. How many do you have?
We have 3.
Okay. And let's talk about parenting for a minute.
Yeah.
What has worked well for you in parenting, and where have you struggled?
Well, very good question. I think what has worked well is having conversations with our kids as if they're another responsible, mature person, rather than talking down to them or not letting them in on big conversations, and just having important conversations with them and making them feel a part of the discussion. And we always have the final say, of course, as parents, but we do definitely listen to our kids and take that into consideration. So challenges, what has not worked well? Well, we have 3 teenagers now, so there's a few things. Yeah. Ugh. You know, with teenagers, I think the key is helping them come to their own conclusion and then supporting them in their conclusion, even if we're not completely in agreement with that. But I will be honest, that's a struggle, right? When you see them about to dive off of a cliff, you're like, maybe you shouldn't do that. Well, they're not going to learn if they don't, skin their knee. So that's the biggest challenge probably.
Yeah, that's got to be so hard. I mean, it's hard with my little kids. They want to they just want to eat chocolate every single meal.
Right.
And I'm like, I want to give them the good things in life, but it's like, that's not good for you.
Right.
And then they're angry. And I'm like, so I'm always making that line of like, how much do I let them just have a stomach ache and be miserable because they didn't eat food? And then I'm like, they get scurvy and they die. So I'm like, there's multiple scenarios there I'm trying to fight against. So yeah, but I like the first point you made there about, treating them like actual people. Like, I read a book called, what was it called? I'm going to forget the name of it, but it was a parenting book. And the best advice in that book was like, and this is for little kids, how to talk so little kids will listen, or how to talk so kids will listen. It said, treat them like grown-ups with grown-up emotions, just smaller versions of them. They're not different. They're just smaller versions. So, like the example they gave that just really made a big impact on me was if your friend came to you, like let's say Cam came to me and was like, hey man, geez, I had an all-nighter last week. What you said to me, right? You did an all-nighter because you had a huge project you were working on and it was really hard. And then we had to do like 3 podcasts last week. And Cam's just pouring out his heart to me. Like, I have this problem and I was staying up all night and I'm just not getting enough sleep. If I was like, well, if you would have planned a little bit better, if you would have, last week, maybe you could have gotten up earlier, Cam. Yeah. Like, how would Cam react to me? He'd be like, douchebag. Like,
exactly.
And like, he would hate me because I'm just not. But if I was like, dude, I feel that. Like, I've been there. That sucks. Yeah. I'm just going to feel it with you. And it gave that example. But adults, we resonate, we feel, we empathize in a conversation, and then we feel heard. But with kids, we don't. We treat them like animals. We're like, you shouldn't feel that way. Yeah. That's a really bad way to feel. Like, you're dumb. And the reason you feel that way is because you made mistakes. So, that made such a big impact on me. Treat them like adults.
I was listening to a podcast that was along those same lines where it was like treating them like adults, where it talked about, like, say we went out to dinner and you were having a great time, and I was ready to go and I wanted you to come with me, and you were like, I don't want to go. And I'm like, no, you're going. Get in the car. Get in the car. Get in the car.
Exactly, yeah.
And they were talking about like just talking to your kids like an adult. And so when we go to the park or something like that, and we're ready to go, and my kids obviously don't want to go, like I'll get down at eye level with them. I'm like, I know you had so much fun today, and we're gonna come back. Instead of just being like, no, we have to go. And so it has been so. Because having those conversations with them instead of just kind of bossing them around,
that's definitely
has
where I
changed everything
Let's go.
for us.
It's time to go.
Yep, time to go. Yeah. And I want I want to be like I don't know, rigid is maybe the wrong word, but like a strong parent and have rules and guidelines and all that. But I also want to treat them like a real person that has a soul and has a future.
So it's that friction that we got to figure out, right?
Yeah, just getting them to understand the reasoning behind.
Right.
Like we have to go because of this.
Yeah,
this
I've been
and
trying
this.
to do more of that too.
Uh-huh.
And then they kind of let go of their grip on their stance, right?
Yeah. I also started treating all my grown-up friends like my kids. I'm always like, all right, guys, 5-minute warning, 3-minute warning, time to go. And Cam's like, okay. All right.
Fine, Brandon.
All right, man. All right, so let's go. Let's talk about the hacker method, the book in general. First of all, why did you write the book?
Well, I had nothing to do. We came back from the field, and we'd gotten to a point to where the real estate was performing and paying for our expenses, and I was kind of intentionally taking some time off and just like following my wife around the house, driving her nuts, and I said, you know what, I've never even, I mean, I have it all up in my head, right? Everything that we've done, and I had friends of mine that when we moved back from the field, everybody asks, what are you going to do next? Nothing, right? I'm just going to like manage the investments. And like, what? Like, I've never heard a missionary for sure ever say anything like that. And so I'd had people start kind of like probing, like, well, tell me about that. How did that happen? And then I had one guy say, do you think I could do that? I'm like, of course you could do that. How? And I'm like, oh, well, it's all up here. I don't know. And so that was what gave birth to the idea of maybe I should like figure out what I did and articulate it and try to get it in a way that other people would understand it. And maybe it could help some people. So that's what gave birth to that.
Very cool. Well, let's go into it. H, you already mentioned that one.
Yeah.
H stands for Hack Your Lifestyle.
Hack Your Lifestyle. So it's just looking at all of your different spending categories and trying to figure out a hack for all of them. The house hack, that's the biggest one. Yeah. Eliminate or reduce dramatically your living expenses, your housing expenses through house hacking. And it doesn't have to it doesn't have to be that you have somebody living in your bedroom. Like that's an absolutely great way to do it. You can rent out a bedroom on Airbnb on a nightly rate, and you can cover your mortgage if you have a couple extra bedrooms, right? But if you don't want that, if you want more privacy, you can buy. I have several homes where I have a house and then a separate building that is on the lot, and you could put a fence between them, so you don't even, nobody would even know, and then you just rent out that other part, and it can cover a vast majority of your mortgage.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that says house hacking is only for like crappy little properties in the ghetto.
Right.
And I'm like, I live in a apparently $5 million house in Maui where I have an extra house, an ADU. We call them Ohanas out here, but there's different names everywhere.
Casitas
in Phoenix. Yep. So you got casitas or casitas, mother-in-law apartments, whatever. Everyone's got a name for it. But it's an ADU is probably the more like
additional dwelling unit.
Yeah. So you got this ADU, and it covers half my mortgage. And then I have technically downstairs I could rent out.
$5 million property.
Yeah, it sucks.
Think about that.
I mean, I paid only 2-ish, but
right.
Like you're charging us to send our kids there for school.
So I'm hacking my basements.
You could do multiple hacks in a house.
Yes,
right?
it's totally possible. And someday, I even looked at my house, and I've got the ADU in the back. I've got the upstairs, which is 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and I have the downstairs, which is 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And plus, there's like a kitchen downstairs and all that. So I could rent the whole bottom out. I could also take the 1-bedroom, which is now a schoolroom, but the 1-bedroom and the kitchen, that's one unit. I could close off the door to the other unit, the master bedroom down there, the primary bedroom. And then I could close that off, put a little tiny kitchenette there.
Would code allow that?
Yes, because it's still rented by the bedroom.
Okay.
So it would not be a legal another unit. I would just shut that door, put a lock on it, and then I put a little kitchenette in front of it, little hot plate, little whatever. And now it's got a separate entrance. And it's its own bathroom. Now I've got a studio. So I've got a studio, I've got the 1-bedroom, and all of this is joined by doors. Right. Which makes it, now it's just, I'm renting by the bedroom. You can lock it, so they're all separate. So I actually have a 4-plex if I wanted to. I could bring in 15 to 20.
You could cover your entire mortgage
and then some, and still live
on a $5 million property
that overlooks the ocean with a pool, and like it's ridiculous.
Well, in a way, we're even house hacking a little bit more creatively, but we have a household assistant that if we were to just go out and hire would cost us $65,000, $70,000 a year. Right. But instead, we have a little, it's connected to our house, but it's a bedroom with a little kitchenette, and we allow them to live there for free. There you go. And now we pay them, $3,000 a month versus $70,000 a year because they're living there. And so we're saving $30,000, $40,000 a year by house hacking in a little bit more of a creative way.
Exactly.
But still.
Yeah, exactly.
Hacking your lifestyle.
You don't do that kind of a thing when you're first getting started, but that's a way to continue to house hack after you've kind of built a portfolio and all that.
Yeah. I like thinking that way too. Like the thing that I've told a story before, but I'll say it now, is when I was looking at buying this house, it was almost $2 million. I'm like, that's literally 10 times more than the most expensive house I ever bought in my life. And I was like, I can't do this. And I called my friend David Green, who is host of a Bigger Pockets podcast now. I'm like, David, this is an amazing house. There's no way I could do it. And he goes, well, let's just look at the worst case scenario. Yeah. Like, okay, it doesn't work. I mean, you got the money for a down payment. You got approved for the loan. So worst case, you have to move back to to the mainland. Yeah. Okay, what happens? I'm like, well, I guess I could rent out the upstairs, downstairs, and back house. So could you pay your mortgage? Yes. So he's like, okay, you can make some cash flow. Yeah, actually, I probably would. Okay, so you're saying, Brandon, worst case scenario, you've got a $2 million house that's going to be worth $5 million 30 years from now, which in reality it's 5 years later. Yeah, 5 years happened. But he's like, 30 years from now, you have a house worth $5 million, and it's paid off to zero, and your tenants paid it off. So very worst case, you're worth $5 million more. Yeah, that's worst case scenario.
So maybe we go to the closing table.
Yeah, exactly. And that one argument convinced me. And so the reason I bring that up too is like, had I instead not bought that and just rented because I was afraid, now I would have missed out on what I've now added over $3 million of value to my house and my net worth. I would have missed out on.
And you would have been paying off somebody else's
mortgage. I'm still paying the monthly cost. Yeah, especially because now rents when I first moved here were probably $5,000 a month. Now they're $15,000 a month. And so like now I have no control over it. My mortgage is fixed. And so if fear could have caused me to miss out on so much and cost me so much. But by having that house hacking, I don't even rent out the basement or the downstairs, the first level. I could rent out that little house. It's an option, sure, and it's a stop.
But you don't need to.
I don't need to, but if I needed to, at any point I could. And that's what I like thinking. Anytime I buy a primary residence, and I may not always think this way, but I feel like I might. I always have to have a way. Yeah, I'm wired that way to say, worst case scenario, how do I not lose? Yeah. What could I do?
So I want to play devil's advocate just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I have a strategy that I have used, and you can look at me and just say, Cameron, you're an idiot. Feel free to do that.
I do that every day.
Yes,
I do it every day.
exactly.
Brandon can do that.
So I was listening to a speech. It was, I don't know who it was by, but they were talking about like betting on yourself. And he literally made, and I'm not advising this for anybody, but he made the comment like, go buy that $150,000 car that you want. Go spend extravagantly because you're putting yourself in a corner to now you have to make that money. And I am a firm believer in betting on yourself, and I would never advise somebody to do that. But I do sometimes think like maybe you do need to spend a little bit of money because that I truly believe that if I came to Brandon right now and say he had no money and I said, Brandon, you have to make $1 million next year or you will never see your family again.
Right.
He's going to figure out a way to make $1 million. And I think I really, truly do. I think most of the people in the world could do it if they were backed into a corner. And so I like that philosophy. So I want to just hear like playing devil's advocate. What's your response to that?
So my response to that would be if I had to generate $1 million in income in order to see my family again, I absolutely would do that. I would not do that for a $150,000 car. I would not do it for that. That doesn't, in my world, that doesn't have the importance of seeing my family again, right? So I would not advise somebody, especially someone who's like, I don't know if I can buy a duplex. Yeah. Like if they're at that level of timidity, if they're at that level of getting started and getting off the fence, I wouldn't advise that. I would, and that kind of comes back to my concept of wealthy people buy luxuries last instead of first. What's our motivation here? Do you want to build wealth because you want to have a $150,000 car? Okay, all right. If that's the case, that's fine. I want to talk to people who want to provide for their family in an abundant way. I want to talk to people who want to buy a building for the community that serves underprivileged kids, like an orphanage or something like that. I want to support people who have that kind of focus, right? Who want to, maybe they donate to the college that they went to or something like that. That's what I want to focus on. So, I wouldn't subscribe to that concept. I understand it. I do understand it.
And I think buying 100, I would never do that. I think that's dumb. But going out and taking a risk, betting on yourself, buying that apartment complex that you don't know if you can afford.
Yeah, so I would say the car, the expensive car, I mean, maybe you can put it on Turo and get some money out of it, but only until it's no longer the coolest car out, right? I mean, that nightly rate on that Turo is going to go way down, right, at some point. An investment property, however, absolutely. And I would push someone pretty hard to get them to take that risk. And I would say that's kind of along the lines of you want to see your family again. Okay, well, this is a way that you can provide abundantly for your family. So this is a risk that you need to take, and you need to jump off that
So it's
ledge.
just evaluating the risk.
Yeah, and the value of what it is that you're chasing, right?
Before moving to Hawaii story real quick is a buddy of mine told me that exact thing. He said, listen, when you move to Hawaii and you got that $10,000 a month payment on your house or your rental or whatever, he goes, you will naturally rise to the occasion and live a bigger life and do whatever. And he wasn't wrong. I did that. Now the counterpoint to that though that I see when people are like, just buy the big boat, buy the car, buy the whatever, because you will make it work. You will make it work. Right. But it takes time away from your life.
Yes.
Everything you do is a piece of your life. It takes, whether it's a mental piece or whether it's a physical piece or time. It takes, I can make, here's a real life example. A year ago, I finally came to the realization that I didn't have a lot of money coming in anymore, right? Because Open Door Capital, I donate my salary away, which is a really good sales pitch for investors saying but it's a true one. It's I literally don't make money unless investors make money first. So I wasn't making money from Open Door Capital. And then Better Life, I decided not to take a salary. And so
Bigger Pockets is over.
And Bigger Pockets was over. And so I was like, well, what do I do for money? I had book royalties coming in. Book royalties just tanked after I left Bigger Pockets.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, now I have really just living on cash flow for my rental property, but I sold almost all my rental properties to dump everything in Open Door Capital, just go all in. And so all of a sudden I was having very limited income, just literally just off the few percent that I was getting from ODC distributions. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I've got 6 months of runway, and I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I launched 4 businesses. One of them, Cam and I are doing Deal Flow. It's your business, but I have an advisor role in it. So I got some equity there. I launched the mortgage company. I launched the 50, which is that high-level mastermind that I have. There's a couple of little things, like smaller things in there. All in all, it fixed the problem. I mean, I brought in millions of dollars. Combined, it's going to be several $1 million a year. It totally worked. I'm working 3 times more than I was a year ago.
Right.
So yes, I solved the problem and I made a bunch of money, and now I'm working way more hours than I want to. So now I'm in this, I'm like, okay, now I got to get out of all this work. And now I'm like trying to figure out how to like reduce my time. So it is possible. And because I have this like lavish lifestyle here in Hawaii, I now have to make tens of thousands of dollars a month just to survive. So there's a pro and con to it. I'm actually a big fan of like the idea of reduce your housing expenses to as much as possible. Ironically, book royalties came back up again, so now they pay all my bills again, which is wonderful. Thank you for buying my books, everyone. You're great. Keep doing it. And yeah, the businesses are thriving, but it takes a piece out of me. It definitely does.
So what I would kind of to put a cap on that, what I would advise someone to do is don't go buy a $150,000 car. In fact, I really promote buy a car that you can pay cash for, kind of the Dave Ramsey concept. Buy a car that you can pay cash for now, but don't buy a $150,000 car. Buy a $500,000 property.
Yeah.
Make it cash flow.
Yep.
Watch the appreciation go up year after year after year. Do that every single year. And then when you get to the end of your process, like the hacker method process, go buy 4 of those cars.
Yeah.
Right? Delay that gratification and really think down the line, right? And when you buy a $500,000 house, you've got the same mindset. Okay, I got to make sure this thing floats because if it doesn't, I'm in trouble, right? And so you got that same motivation to keep it going. That would be what I would say.
I really wanted a Tesla really bad for years. Like this was back like 5 years ago now. I really wanted a Tesla, and I was like, but I refused to buy one until I could get an asset to pay for it. So then finally, I was able to work out this kind of burr property where I got $1,000 a month in cash flow from it here on Maui, and so
bought your Tesla.
Bought my Tesla. And then ironically, like a month later, I flipped the property here, and I made like 140 grand or something like that on it. So I just paid the whole thing off.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean, it was a win-win, and now I just get the cash flow from the property.
Right.
Yeah. So I waited until it. So I think people oftentimes look at guys like us who are 20 years into their career and like, well, he has a Tesla, so I can buy a Tesla.
Right.
Well, I didn't buy the Tesla until I could afford, like until I had the Tesla, I could pay for it.
Right.
So it's just a good reminder for people to.
I'm not 20 years into my career, but I also drive a $5,000.
That is true. You drive a $5,000.
1995.
Yeah, but you have the coolest truck. You have the coolest truck in town.
It is cool. It is cool.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a cool truck.
There you go.
All right, so that's hack your lifestyle. Let's go to the A.
Allocation budgeting. So that's the 50-40-10 concept. So get your income or get your expending down to 50% of your income by reducing your expenses, but also increasing your income. And then 40% start investing that in whatever way that you feel comfortable. I know if you haven't been investing, that might feel intimidating to you. So just start with the basics. Throw it into an S&P 500 mutual fund and just kind of start watching the market and see what happens when the Fed does this and that does that. And Caterpillar has these, just learn the ebb and flow of investing and let that account build up until you can get, and I do recommend people eventually get into real estate. It's the most tried and true asset class for building wealth for thousands of years, right? Yeah. Crypto is like 3 years, of existence or 13 or 30 or whatever it is. But I just encourage people to, get started. Don't wait. Put that 40% in. The earlier you start, the easier it's going to be down the road. If you can start really early and you have lots of years after your portfolio has built up, it's just so much easier. I talk about financial escape velocity also, like all the thrust and the fuel that it takes to get up off the ground. But then you get to this point to where you've broken past gravity and you're just literally effortlessly flying at 17,000 miles an hour. It's the same kind of thing happens in building wealth. It takes effort and fuel and energy and focus and trial and error and to get up off the ground. But there's a certain point, and I was talking to David Osborne actually told me this concept. It gets to be a certain point to where the laws of financial gravity no longer really apply to you. You've broken past that. And it's not effortless, but it just takes a little bit of fuel to keep that number climbing and climbing and climbing, right? Yeah. And so that it takes that effort in the beginning. You've got to start investing that 40% and then give the 10% away. So that piece of that, I talk about. So my experience as running a nonprofit, I had to do a lot of fundraising. And I would meet with 100 millionaires and 50 millionaires and widows that had nothing and were living on Social Security. And I was always blown away by when, I would go in, I'm going to ask this person for money, and I'd feel bad about it. And I'd feel like resistant and sweating. And, oh my gosh, I'm going to ask them for money, and they're going to tell me to get out of their house. Almost every single time, not only did they not kick me out of their house, they said, thank you. I'm like, what? thank you for asking you for money. Did you hear me? I want you to give me money, right? And the truth is the people who have figured out how to give away some of what they have earned, I think are the happiest people on earth.
Yeah, I agree.
And when I teach the 50-40-10 budget, oftentimes we're focused on the 50%. What can I spend my money on? But when you learn how to give your money away, that can become your favorite category. Like what makes your heart tick? What injustice, like human trafficking, what injustice breaks your heart and you want to fix? And as you get wealthier, you can write bigger and bigger checks and you can have a bigger and bigger impact on the world. And so yeah, 50% on your spending, 40% on your investing, which it is a spending account, but just 15 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now, right? And then that 10% to change the world.
Yeah, I really believe that God has given certain people a desire to go and serve as a missionary and to make no money and to be broke. And other people, I think he's given the desire to sit and pray for 4 hours a day for people. Right. And he's given some people the desire and the ability to go out and raise mass amounts of money and to make it. And it's not for them. Like God did not give me this unique ability and you this ability just so we can buy a private jet. Even though I may buy a private jet someday. Sure. I buy a lot, but I may not, because that might be, I look at that as a depreciating asset where I will buy the nicest house for the rest of my life and I will always punch like higher than I can reach, because I know that real estate will always win. Or at least I believe it will almost always win. Right. So, and then it all goes to him anyway at some point. It all goes to good no matter what. So,
you do get 100% depreciation though.
And I get 100% depreciation. No, did that come?
I think it did. I think it did. They're voting on it.
Is that final?
It's not final yet.
It's coming now. We think it's coming. We'll see. When this episode airs, we'll know.
Yes.
Oh, really? When is that dropping? When is that?
I don't know. When's the book come out officially?
February 27th.
This will probably drop somewhere right around February 27th.
Yeah, I think they said February 26th.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when this episode drops, pick up a copy of The Hacker Method, but we're not done yet. All right. HA. Next, we got CK.
CK, Cash is King Investing. And in that chapter, or in that section, I'm really trying to expose people who've never really thought of themselves as investors. So it's the unexpected investor's guide to building wealth, right? You need to make that leap from being a consumer. So what I always tell people is when you look at your paycheck, like hopefully you have a physical printout, right? Like look at your paycheck and tell your paycheck, you have 3 purposes. Half of you is to spend for me now, 40% of you is to invest, and 10% is to change the world through your generosity, right? And you're looking at your paycheck, and that 40% investing, you've got to accept the identity or the label of I am an investor, right? Because it is so different from I am a consumer. Like, oh, I got this paycheck. Like when I got my first job and I got my first paycheck, like what could I spend all this money on, right? And instead of saying that, saying, how can I invest this money? And begin to take on the identity of looking for opportunities. I always say, somebody might be saying, I'm waiting for an opportunity to fall in my lap. And I have a kind of a comeback to that. Opportunities don't fall in your lap. They pass by your line of vision. And if you recognize them and you grab them, you can do something with them. If you don't recognize them, they keep on going, right? They just fly right out of your line of sight and they move on to somebody else that knows what they're looking for and grabs it.
That's a great point. That's really good. All right, so what is Cash is King investing? Why Cash is King? What does that mean?
It's really just a play on that concept that the one who has the cash is the one who makes the decisions.
So when you can save your cash up, you can now go and invest it.
Exactly right.
Got it.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
and if you using your cash to make more cash, always be conscious of buying assets that go up in value and pay you cash, right? My advice is always to invest in things that do both of those things, not one or the other. Like you could loan money out to people, that's fine, and that's going to get you some cash, but your capital is not growing, right? You could invest in a growth stock, and that's going to go up in value, so it's going up, but it's not paying you a dividend, right? I always encourage people to get both of those sources, and real estate is a fantastic asset class in that sense, that it typically goes up in value. In fact, I want to say this. When I was doing research, I went to the U.S. Census, and they started recording the median household sale price in 1940. And then they studied the median sale price every decade after that. There has not been a single decade, the Great Depression, 15 recessions, the dot-com bust, the 2008 crash. There hasn't been a single 10-year period from 1940 to 50, 67 where real estate hasn't gone up by at least 40% in that decade.
Wow.
No losses. and not even small gains, 40% increase or more, not average and not annual, but over that 10 years, right?
That's wild.
And so we can't guarantee that that's going to be the case going in the future, but the history tells us it's very likely. So have a long-term view on your investing. Dump your 40% cash into income-producing assets that go up in value, and ride that out to generate more cash.
I saw somewhere, and I haven't fact-checked this, but there's never been a span of 5 years in real estate where it's gone down in value. So like you've hit 2009, and obviously it dropped a lot, but by
And 10, and
2014 it had caught back up and was over. So there's never been a span of 5 years.
Yeah, wow.
But I love the unexpected, like kind of you're the unexpected investor, because I see those people all the time. Because I invest in single family homes, and so part of that is going to other single family owners and buying their houses. And so there's this really cool story that I had where it was a guy and he was a janitor. He was very open about it. He had never made more than like $40,000 a year.
Right.
But in I think the house was built in like 1965. He bought a house for $30,000, and then a couple years later, his neighbor wanted to sell, and he bought that for like $35,000. And a couple years later, another one bought that for like $40,000. And then he had 3 houses back to back to back, all on the same street. Never did anything else. Never invested any more money. Those houses are all worth like $400,000 to $500,000 now. So
happy for him.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a cool story. I mean, it took 60 years to get there. And now he's, I think he's, in his late 70s, but without ever making more than $40,000 in a year, without ever even really trying, he's a millionaire now just from 3 house purchases.
That's my mission. Wild. I want to find people just like that, and I want to grab them and give them a big hug, and I want to say, let's do this together, because it is possible. It is possible.
That's awesome. All right, HACKER. What's the E?
So E is exponentiality. So and I don't think that's an actual word, but exponentiality. So the idea is
technically every word we have was not a word at one point.
That is true. That is true. It was Latin, and then before that it was rosebud, right?
Yeah, it was something else. Everybody invented every word ever made.
That's true. So exponentiality will be in the dictionary here in a couple of years. So the concept is when you're first getting started, you have to dump cash in order to get money to come back out, and so it might feel like slow, and it might feel like, man, I got 38 cents in dividends this month from my stocks. Like what? This is not going to do anything, and you need to get to that point to where you're learning how to invest, to where you like the Burr is a great example in real estate, where you maybe do an initial investment up front, but you figure out a way to get your initial investment out so that your investment into an asset is zero, but you still have the asset and it's still producing income. So exponential growth, to where you've gotten to the point to where your portfolio is large enough. The cash is king concept comes back in, where you can buy assets and condition it in a way to where, here's an example on a stock. If you bought a stock and you did great on it and it doubled in value, sell half of it, pull your initial capital back out, and then just leave that profit in there to multiply forever, theoretically. That's how you get exponential returns on your investment, to where literally you have nothing invested, but it's paying you and going up in value. That's exponentiality.
Yeah, I remember. So we've done the Burr method over 50 times, on single family houses. But I remember the very first one we did. I mean, it was amazing because we captured all of our money invested, but it was like, we get $250 of cash flow. It's going to take a long time to get there,
and a lot of them.
Yes, but then we were able to just continue doing that over time, and eventually the cash flow just from our single family portfolio paid for all of our bills, and we hit level 1 financial freedom. But just doing that over and over again and letting that grow, it was amazing. Yeah.
Very cool. Hey, I want to ask you about the R, but first, one thing we do on the show is we set aside the entire ad revenue from every episode to give to a charity of the guest choosing. So where are we sending the money from this episode?
So my lovely wife she's a registered nurse, and when we came back from the field, she just had this desire to serve people one-on-one. And so she went and is volunteering for Hushabye Nursery, which is a nursery for babies that are born addicted to opioids. And so literally, the statistics are something like a baby that goes through their program is released a week later, whereas a baby just in a normal hospital is released 28 days later. Wow. So it's 1 week instead of 4 weeks. And so it just really sets that baby on a new track. And so to support my wife, I would love for those funds to go to that nursery, because they're helping many, many, many people.
We'll make it happen. Hey, here's an urgent message for podcasters, but only if you're seriously committed and you're willing to spend a little bit of money to work with a rock star team like Podcast Pointman. Did you know 90% of podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes? It's crazy, right? I mean, what's the difference between podcasters who fade away and then the top performers who get downloads, they make money, they raise capital, they have fun along the way? Well, I can tell you, a lot of it comes down to the team around you. You'll give yourself a much better chance of building a profitable and successful podcast if you have experts helping edit video and audio, handling monetization, and building a growth strategy. So if you're serious about taking things to the next level with your podcast, or just getting started with one and blowing up your show, I highly recommend Kevin's team at Podcast Pointman. I hired Kevin over at Bigger Pockets, actually, and we work with his team to this day. So here's what to do if you're a podcaster who wants to grow. Check out Kevin's free masterclass. It's called 5 Ways to Grow Your Show Today. You can find that video on his homepage at podcastpointman.com. That's podcastpointman.com for a masterclass on podcast growth. Link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. I'm so good at ads, man.
That was amazing.
Yeah, thanks. We'll make
I'm
you do
signing
ads.
up.
Yeah, good. All right. The R on hacker.
So it's 4 words. It's review. In any business, in anything that you're doing, you need to analyze what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Is this working? Yeah. So review it. Is it working for you? If it's working for you, repeat it. Yeah. Repeat it. So one of the things that I struggle with as an entrepreneur is I get distracted by shiny objects. Right?
No.
Yes.
And
it took me until I was like 40 years old where I finally said, stop, just focus on what you're good at. And so if it's working, you need to stay focused. If it's not working, the other R is rework it. Mm-hmm. You need to pivot. So in 2016, when I discovered short-term rentals, Airbnb, I switched from all traditional rentals to short-term rentals. That was a pretty significant pivot because now I'm basically a hotel operator, right? Yeah. And that's a big difference in the business model. So rework it, and then R is reward. And I found, for sure for me, and I found other people who've been successful, that may be a hard step to do because you've gotten so conditioned. You know, like the 50-40-10, invest 40%, do this, to get to the point to where you allow yourself to reward yourself, buy that Tesla, or buy that jet, or whatever it is that you need to do. And I honestly think that that's an important part of the process. Otherwise, so I actually say people who are, even if they're wealthy, if they're unable to release their cash, that's a form of greed, right? And I know that sounds weird that I don't think it's greedy to not buy a Tesla, but I think it is. I think we are supposed to enjoy the blessings that we have received, right? Yeah. And so as long as we're being responsible with the things that we have, we need to reward ourselves. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. I think when people just stockpile their money and they just will not spend it, that's not a sign necessarily of good stewardship. Yeah. It's a sign of not trusting yourself and God to take care of you. You're relying on
placing too high of a value on money itself.
Yeah. Like I need to have this vault of money to feel secure. Yes. No, I need to be in a relationship with Jesus to feel secure or whatever. You know, the money is just, it's nice. And so I'm going to give it away. I'm going to spend it. I'm going to use it. Yeah. I'm not going to be irresponsible.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's great. I love the reward.
I have a story about that, of just the reward side of things, because when we got started, we were doing really well and we were making a lot of money, but I was in the philosophy of like, I'm just going to keep working really, really hard, stockpiling as much money as I can. And we got hit by a drunk driver. With our kids in the car. Ooh. And
I never heard this story.
You've never heard this?
No.
Oh, dude, this is the reason we're in Maui.
Oh, maybe you told it on the podcast.
I don't know if I did, but
I don't know. Keep going.
So we got hit by a drunk driver, and he was going about 60. He was going about 60. Luckily, we were driving an SUV, and so we ended up being fine, shaken up, whiplash. We ended up being fine, but legitimately, like probably a couple months beforehand, we had sold a little Toyota Corolla that we were driving and gotten this SUV.
Right.
And so I remember I was so like. It was weird because we were fine, but just like I went through a lot of anxiety because of that. Because I'm like, what could have happened if we were in that Corolla? Right. So going through like this, like, hey, in the blink of an eye, everything could have changed. Yeah. And so I started talking to actually a counselor about it, where I was like, I'm so nervous, and he actually had me do this exercise, and he was like, hey, Cameron, like let's play this out. He called it like some like worst case scenario, or almost like visualizing like the worst.
Yeah.
And he's like, what would you be doing today if you knew in 5 years something bad was going to happen? Right. And we started like working through those exercises, and I was like, I wouldn't work as much. I would spend more of the money that I have. Like we had made it at that point where I'm like, I would move to Maui.
Right.
And so we started rewarding ourselves. Like I feel like that was an integral moment in that, where it was like, hey, we actually are making a lot of money, and we can afford to move our family to Maui.
Right.
And I get to not work as much if I don't want to. And so it was actually a really great thing that happened to us. It sucked at the time, but because of that, I'm like, we're going to reward ourselves for the hard work that we're putting in, and we get to spend more time with our kids now. So that was an interesting story about how I started rewarding myself for all of the work that we're putting in and the money that we're making.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Have you read Die with Zero, the book?
I think I have it on my shelf, and it's in the stack yet to read.
Yeah. You have that shelf.
Which is
I got that stack
it's
too.
too big. It's too tall.
Yes. I heard a quote the other day that said something along the lines of like, your books, like don't get anxiety about the giant pile of books in your house that are unread.
Right.
It's like a collection of wine. Like you just need the right night to open it.
I love that.
Yeah, isn't that great? It's like
so
oh
good.
yeah, I just have like 50 books I haven't read.
It's
maybe
getting
a couple
better
hundred.
with time.
Yeah,
sitting
exactly.
there.
It gets better time, and the right night and the right day, you're like, I'm going through this problem.
Yes.
And that book,
Yes.
books call
So
to you,
good,
don't
so
they?
good.
Like,
Yes.
they're like, anyway, Die with Zero. I read it. He called me after 6 months of sitting on my shelf. Yeah, it's a very similar concept of like, we can't take it with us.
Yeah, right.
So how do you spend it at the appropriate level and the appropriate amount, whether spend, give, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that book I thought was pretty great. It's like definitely like if you read that book and you're not wealthy in some way, it's probably like, this is a lame book. But for those of us who have some money, it's like, it's a really good read.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Because you are going to die with zero.
You are.
essentially.
Yeah, you are.
I mean,
yeah,
at least the moment after you die.
Exactly. Yeah, you got
nothing.
nothing left. So yeah, how do you allocate it?
Right.
Did you? It's a very serious question. Did you ever think about calling the book the Hacker Method with 4 R's, like Burr?
I didn't.
Hacker.
I didn't think about that.
Nobody would ever do that.
Yep.
Nobody would come up with something like that.
It's so
So
good.
dumb.
It's so good. It's so wonderful. All right, STR, short-term rentals.
Yeah.
You said you got into those. What has worked with them? What's your portfolio look like? How have you found success with them?
So we have 36 short-term rentals.
Where
at? In Boise, Idaho, and Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah.
Why
and
Boise?
one in the mountains. I was born there. So so that's just where I started building my portfolio. And so in the short-term rental story, so we had traditional rentals. I think we had 17 units at the time. And I was living in, I don't know, Peru or Ecuador, I can't remember. And we had come back to the U.S., and because we had tenants in all of our houses, we couldn't stay in any of our houses. So we had somebody from the church, they lent us their house. We got back to the U.S. late. We got to the house at 1 o'clock in the morning. We walked in, and I took like 3 steps into the house and realized I was walking in like 2 or 3 inches of water. So the house was flooded. And so by 3 o'clock in the morning, we got the water main shut off, called the owner, and crashed in a hotel. And we have a family of 5. And so the next morning I wake up, it's just a disaster. And I'm like, we cannot do this. And my wife said, oh, have you heard about that? What is it? Airbnb? You know, like it was 2016, right? It's like, okay, yeah. So I opened an account in Boise, Idaho, looking for a 3-bedroom house. It was September. It wasn't even like summer peak season. September, there were only 3 houses, and they were all like $160 and up per night. I was like, how much am I getting for my houses? Like $30 a night.
Yeah.
And so that started the wheels turning. A couple months later, I switched a couple of my units to short-term rentals. That went so well. I flipped my entire portfolio by the end of the year. And so I switched everything over to short-term rentals in 2016. Yeah.
What are the changes you've seen in short-term rentals over the last, whatever
Yeah.
it is, 8
So,
years?
like I said earlier, yesterday's luxury is today's expectation. The quality that you have to produce just keeps getting higher and higher. The amenities that you offer has to keep getting higher and higher. COVID was an unnatural spike. The hangover after COVID was an unnatural trough, right? And now what we're seeing is finally for the last 5 or 6 months, we've had month-over-month gains from the same month previous year in daily rate and occupancy or total rent. And so we're finally starting to recover from that. So yeah, that's what I see in our markets anyway.
How about legality-wise or legislation?
Yeah.
Have they been cracking down? Like, if laws change, how do you navigate that?
So
that
there
side?
are 5 or 6 states that passed laws back in 2016 that actually protected property owners' rights for short-term rentals. Idaho was one of them, and Arizona was one of them. So those are the 2 states that I'm invested in, and I would only invest in states that have a law similar to that. Now, they are able to regulate, so they can charge a license fee and all this kind of stuff, but they cannot prohibit it. And so that is where I would choose to invest. But yeah, there's some other markets like New York where it's basically banned. San Francisco too, which is where Airbnb came from, ironically. Where it's basically banned. So yeah,
Hawaii
there's
is
challenges.
basically banned unless you're in like a hotel zoned
Exactly.
like condo here, but that makes the opportunity massive
Exactly.
for those spots.
I was just going to say that. If you can get into an HOA community,
Yeah.
for example, that doesn't allow it, but you can somehow get grandfathered in, that is a valuable property, right? Not only for your cash flow while you own it, but when you sell it, because you can sell it, this is Airbnb approved or short-term rental approved, right? So yeah, if you can get a license in a market where it's restricted, that's actually maybe even a better place to invest.
I agree.
So,
Yeah, my Airbnbs just print money.
Yeah.
And it's
because
like,
there's so few available.
so few available. Yeah.
Right.
Like $300-400 a night, $500 a night for
Yeah.
like a little condo.
Yeah.
And and the condos I bought, they're called lock-offs. So there's like 2 sides of them.
Right.
And so I can rent them each separately. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
one usually goes for about $300, one goes about $400. I'm
Okay.
like, that's $700 a night.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. And
Yeah.
rented 28 nights a month.
Yeah.
Like it's always booked. Because they don't have many here.
Yeah,
And
right.
so it's super. Yeah. Whenever people are like, oh yeah, you can't do Airbnb in my area. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
you can. It's
Yeah.
hard. Pick your hard.
Like Denver. Denver's very strict on short-term
Oh, yeah.
rentals.
Yeah.
But if you're just outside of that boundary, you can
Yep.
do well because you're close enough to downtown, but you
Yep.
can.
So I know people though in Denver that got destroyed by
Yeah.
that because they made a rule basically overnight where it was like it has to be your personal residence
Right.
and you can't do it for more than 15 nights
Right.
a month.
Right.
And so I had a buddy actually who had like 30 of them, and then overnight his business
Yeah.
completely went away.
Yeah.
Fortunately for him, he bought them all right, and
Cheap,
Denver
yeah.
appreciated over time, so he just sold them all and made a ton of money. But that could happen.
That is
my
the danger
fear
of
with
newer.
a lot of new
It's like you
investors.
mentioned Bitcoin earlier,
Yeah,
crypto.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that's the fear. Airbnb's been around for 5 years.
Yeah.
So like, I like having backup plans. Like
Yeah.
I could rent out my condos, traditional, like normal rental,
Yeah.
and I could pay the mortgage.
All of my properties, I could flip them to traditional rentals
Yep.
and at least break even.
Yep, that's what I would always.
That's
shoot
always
for.
how I underwrite. And
Yep,
that's
same.
I would always advise that.
So when you switched your portfolio over to short-term rentals, did you just get lucky and buy in the right areas where that worked,
No,
or did
they
you?
were not ideal.
Oh, they were not ideal.
I mean,
Okay.
they were rentals, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I had 4plexes, and they're just like 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 4plex, basic, not really not super nice units. We did everything we could to clean them up and make them nice, and back in 2016, the luxury expectation was pretty low.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a problem. And since then, I've upgraded to better properties. But no, they were not ideal for
Really?
it. But it was just such a at least in the beginning, what I would always say is that short-term rentals was double the revenue and triple the profit, right? Over traditional rentals.
Yeah.
And even just on in a normal neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's a misconception is that all Airbnbs are like they have to be in a luxury area overlooking the ocean in
Nope.
Hawaii. It's like people travel for lots of reasons,
Yeah, yeah.
and they need a place to stay.
We have an Airbnb in St. Louis that's just in a random neighborhood. It's probably a $350,000 house. There's nothing special. It's not in a great location, but people still have to travel there for work,
Yep.
graduations, funerals. We see a lot of people traveling for funerals, for their kids, because it's St. Louis. It is in the middle of the United States, and so
Right.
there's a lot of like
Right.
sports stuff there.
Right.
But there's nothing special about it. It is not in a cool area. You can't walk to bars. You can't walk to restaurants,
Right.
and it still does really well.
Yeah.
And so I
Well, your
think
costs are lower than if you're in those prime areas,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you want to succeed in that area, like of Airbnb, you have to learn the rules.
Yeah.
Learn how to break the rules legally,
right.
and then learn figure out what everyone else is not doing, like you
Right.
just mentioned there.
Right.
And if you can do those things, they require some upfront work. It's the people that are just like, oh, I'm going to buy an Airbnb, and so they take some course maybe for an hour, and they're like, oh, I'm going to go buy that one over there. Like, you're not putting in the work to learn how to do it right. Maybe over time you'll be fine, but Airbnb can be phenomenal.
Yeah.
If you work it right.
Yeah, but it can be bad too.
It can be brutal if you're not doing it right. Yeah. And again, with having a backup plan like you have is great.
Right.
How about financing? Like, how have you found financing on those? Or do you just own them cash, or have you just got normal mortgages?
So I'm kind of doing a burster.
Okay.
It's a new term I've heard
Burster.
over on the
Burster,
Bigger Pockets
I like
folks.
it.
So a burr with a short-term rental on the
rental,
back end. So that's what I've been doing since I've come back from the field. Which funny thing I wanted to tell you.
Yeah.
So when I came back from the mission field, I had several $1 million worth of real estate. And I'd been investing since I was 19 years old. And I really felt like I knew nothing about real estate investing. I knew relatively little. And so when I came back and I had nothing to do, I went to Google and I was like, real estate education, blunk, and Bigger Pockets popped up. I don't know if it was first, but it was on the first page. You ever heard the phrase, you want to hide a dead body, put it on the second page of Google?
Yeah.
So you were on the first page. I found you, and literally for a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, I just listened to another episode or two.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I started in the middle and I heard Burr and ARV and I didn't know all this alphabet. I didn't know this stuff. So I went back to the beginning and not the very beginning, but I've listened to most of those episodes.
That's awesome.
And you had a big impact on me as I came back decompressed out of the mission field. So
thank you, sir. I love hearing that.
So with the Burr Stir, tell me about financing on that.
Yeah.
Will they will they only refinance it like at a long-term rental rate, or will they take the short-term rental rate and say, hey, you say you're going to get $3,500 a month, and so we can use that when we're giving you financing?
Well, I have the benefit of being able to say I have 35 of these, and this is whatever you want to look at. Here you go. Yep. This is my cash flow. My debt to equity is very low across the whole portfolio. And some bankers, they still don't care, right? These bean counters are just like, nope, that doesn't check the box, right? But I've found a few lenders that will accept a property. Some of them like to have at least a couple of months as a short-term rental so that they can show, okay, yes, it's generating rent and this is what it's going to do. It's not easy, right? Yeah, short-term rental financing isn't as easy as traditional rental financing, even though it's double the revenue and triple the profit. Yep. For whatever reason, it's a challenge. But yeah, I just keep looking for lenders until I find one that's willing to go along with it.
Well, you illustrate a really good point here in that I think most newbie real estate investors look at financing and they assume that all banks are the same banks. All lenders are the same lenders. And so they go to Chase Bank or Bank of America and it's like, no. So it's like, all right, I guess I can't do that. It's not going to work. But there's so many different types of lenders out there, and there's small local community banks and whatever.
Unions.
Yeah, one of our friends, actually, somebody lives here on Maui recently, their lender said, hey, we don't want to do any more loans with you. We've already done 20 or 30 with you. We're done right now. We're going to wait for a few, whatever. The market's changing. And so this friend of ours just got on a plane, flew back to their city, spent a week there just talking to bankers, came back with 3 new lenders.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It just get it done. Get it done. It's like, I think she went and interviewed 20 different ones, but found 3, came back home, and now she's buying real estate again.
Most of my loans are through credit unions. Right?
Yeah.
Just like they're focused on the community where you're developing, and they're more willing to do creative stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Very cool, man. All right. Well, we've got to start wrapping things up pretty soon. But last question I got for you before we move to the final several segments: wealth and religion, or wealth and spirituality. I'm assuming you're still a follower of Jesus.
Yes.
You're still a Christian dude. There's a lot of, I don't want to say misconception, but a lot of drama around should Christians build wealth? You guys like Randy Alcorn, who will say you should only live on a very small income and 100% of everything else you have you should give away.
Right.
And then you have Dave Ramsey, who's got probably $1 billion. Yeah. Where do you fall in that? What does that mean to be a Christian who has wealth? How do we look at that?
Yeah. So in the book, I dedicate the last section to that, and I titled it "The Morality of Wealth."
Okay.
And I conduct my life, and I'd love to hear what you think about this question too, because I'm sure you've grappled with it. And whatever I say here, I need to give the preface that I wrestle with this. Right. This is something I think about often, and I always want to check myself, and I want to make sure that I'm in the right frame of mind and doing the right things for the right reasons. So I see that there are 3 concepts that I have pulled out of my worldview, my Judeo-Christian worldview, that really drive this discussion for me. Number 1, we as human beings are supposed to maximize what we are given.
Yep.
Full stop. We're not supposed to sit on the couch and eat ice cream and watch Netflix all the time. It's okay to do that to unwind and relax after you've spent a day maximizing.
Yep.
We are wired to maximize, and that maximize our relationships, maximize our time, maximize our wealth. And my basis for that is Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, where Jesus is telling a story about a master who has a lot of money, and a talent, for reference, a talent, I think, I did the research on this, I think it was 20 years of salary of a common worker of the time. So if you put that in today's numbers, it's like $1 million, right? So a talent was $1 million, and Jesus said that this wealthy guy gave one guy $5 million. the other guy $2 million, and the third guy $1 million. And he said, go out and grow this. And he didn't give them, it's not talents in the sense of, look, I can spin plates on my fingers. It's not that kind of a talent. I can't.
Okay,
can you?
No.
The talent is gold. Right? There's another version of the Bible that says it's the parable of the bags of gold. Right? So we're talking about money here. We can't be getting all religious and saying, no, he's talking about whatever.
Yeah, your skill sets.
He's talking about money. So he's telling these people, go out and invest this money. So the one guy with 5 million does, he turns it into 10. The guy with 2 million does, he turns it into 4, which is no small feat, by the way, right? And the guy that has 1 goes and buries it in the yard, right? Covers it up. When the master comes back, he says, okay, give me an account of what you've done. The one guy gives him the 10 million, and he says, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the master. Yeah. Most theologians would agree that that's heaven. Yeah. Come on in. You're welcomed in. And that blows my mind as someone who understands who Jesus is, and I think I know what he's talking about, and this just kind of goes against a lot of the concepts that I had about money. The guy that had 4, same thing, enter into the joy of the Lord. And then the last guy who hid it in the yard, didn't steal it, didn't lose it, gave it back. Here's the full $1 million, wipes the dirt off of it. Here's the full $1 million that you gave me. He says, get out of here, you wicked and lazy servant, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Theologians think that's hell. Yeah. So Jesus is telling a story. Invest what you've got. Yeah. And even if you lose it, that's okay. Just make the effort. Invest what you've got. Maximize what I am giving you, because I'm the master in this story. I've given you everything that you have, and your job is to maximize it. Yeah. Okay? And he's talking about money. Yeah. Now, counter to that, or the counterbalance to that concept of the morality of wealth, is you have to put the people in your lives and God above your money. Yeah. That's that living in that friction, right? Maximize, but don't maximize it at the damage of your relationships, whether that's with God or with people, okay? So those two things have to be in constant conflict and constant friction in order for you to be following that balance. And then I say that the third concept, the third Christian concept that I use to guide my wealth building journey is God also wants us to be extremely generous. And that ties those two concepts together. Maximize what you can earn, love people more than you love your money, and then prove that by giving it away to help other people live a better life than what they could without your support. Yeah. Those are the three things.
I love that.
That's what guides my journey.
That's great, man.
One of my mentors, because I come from a background with not a lot of wealth whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
And so started making a lot of money. And I actually, coming from a Christian background as well, felt bad about it. Right. And so one of my mentors, I was talking with him through it, where he's like, I want to continue just to grow and to maximize. And he said something that I remind myself all the time. He just looked at me and was like, healthy things grow, Cameron. Yeah. Healthy things grow. And he kept saying that. Yeah. So I tell myself that all the time, where it's like, healthy things grow. Yeah. And so if Brandon was sitting there and he wasn't growing, there would probably be some unhealth in his life, to be completely honest with you, And so that's something I always fall back on. Is it's not wrong. I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime somebody talks to me about wealth and Christianity and tries to imply that it's bad, I always remind them that they have an iPhone. Yeah. And so they're already wealthier than the wealthiest person in Jesus' time. They're wealthier than the king and the governors and all that, and the Pharisees. They are richer and better off in life than every person in Jesus' day. More luxury. Right. So once we remove the self-righteousness from the thing, you're rich and therefore I'm not, so I'm better than you. Once we remove that from the equation, and you realize Jesus is talking to all of us. Yeah. Every warning against wealthy people is everybody in the Western world, pretty much, right? So I look at that, and then I say the Bible doesn't contradict itself. I do not believe it does. Some people might say that you could argue different things that are contradictions. Sure. I could argue against them every time and say they're not, right? If the Bible encourages wealth building, which it does many times throughout it, but it also warns against wealth many times. Right. Therefore, it would not contradict itself, which means that wealth, it would not be encouraging sin. It would not be encouraging something that's wrong. It would be like, hey, you should probably sleep around with a lot of different people in your life, but also you shouldn't commit adultery. It doesn't do that, right? It's very aligned. So how do we align then? Here's how to build wealth, and here's principles for building wealth that you see, especially in books like Proverbs, and then and Jesus' parable with you can't serve God and money. Right. how do you reconcile them? There has to be an alignment there. The way I look at that, then I justify maybe the wrong word, but I combine them into wealth is dangerous and powerful. And with great power comes great responsibility. So throw Uncle Ben and Spider-Man into the Bible, and you got great power, great responsibility, right? It's basically, the Bible part two.
Basically.
Spider-Man. So, that's how I look at wealth. It's not inherently bad. It is dangerous in the wrong hands.
Yes.
It does reveal who you are more, and you need to have brothers and sisters around you to keep you in check.
Yeah.
And I love the phrase that you said. I just wrote it down. It's like the wrestle. I think that more Christians need to be honest with the fact that we wrestle with a lot of things all the time because we don't have all the answers, and the Bible is not super crystal clear, even though every pastor would like to say that it is. Our church teaches the Bible. I'm like, okay.
Church down the road teaches
they teach the Bible. No, they teach the wrong Bible.
Right.
Like
the wrong verses.
Yeah, the wrong. Yeah, they're applying them the wrong way. I'm like, all right. It's like every contractor thinks every other contractor sucks. Every pastor says every other church sucks.
Why do they do it that way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no matter what. I've learned that. Never listen to a contractor about somebody else's other contractor's work. It's always bad.
Yeah, it's true.
Every other church is always bad. So. All right, man. Love it. Well, we got to start moving towards the end. So the next segment we call the 3-2-1 pivot.
Okay.
The idea of a pivot, you mentioned it earlier, actually. Your life's going one direction. Boom. Something changes it, goes another direction. So we'll start with this one. 3 pivot books. Books that change the direction of your life.
So it's kind of an older book, but the 21 Immutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. I think it came out in the 90s probably. And to be honest, today everything is the one thing.
Yep.
Not the 21 things, right? Or the 3 things max. 3 things, right?
Don't go more than 3.
21, I don't remember any of the 21. Yeah. I mean, maybe if I sat and thought about it. But there was a concept in that book that really changed the way I was a leader. So it was 21 Immutable Laws of Leadership. And I was running my nonprofit at the time when I read it. And John Maxwell was a pastor.
Yep.
And so he said, if you want to see a true great leader, go find someone who's leading volunteers.
Yeah.
Because he's not paying them a salary.
Dude, I've heard that too. It's so good.
Yes. And it's so true,
too. The best leaders are usually church pastors or missionaries.
Right. Because they have to, otherwise people are going to scatter like cats, right?
They have to inspire.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just really latched onto that, and that's what drove my work in volunteer work, and of course has affected me today. So I'm not going to say I am the greatest leader, but I try to grow, and I try to assume obviously I pay my staff, but what would I need to be saying and doing that they would stick around as if they were the volunteers that I had when we were planting churches, right? Yeah. And so I try to use that to guide my leadership style. Awesome. So there's that one. The second one I would say is, everybody says Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? And that did impact me, but I'm not going to say that that's one of my books because I think when I read that, I had the right mindset to where that was going to connect with me. Because I've given that book to other people, and they read it like, meh, it's not for me, right? Do you have that book here? Yeah,
it's in there, somewhere in
there. And so I think it's important for people to be in the right mind space when they read any book in order to get there. I would say that the second book, and I know this is a little bit cliche, and I'm not one of those. Believe me, I'm not one of those guys to say God told me and the Bible says this. I'm not one of those guys. But that Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, really has shaped, at least my investing career, has really shaped me. And we already talked about why that was impactful for me. And I would say the third book, and this is kind of going unconventional too. I wanted to give answers not most people give. All right, is my book, not because I think it's earth shattering and everybody's got to read it, but because of what it did for me. So when I'm unemployed, right? I'm in this whole weird space, like where I used to be like this public figure, and now I'm just in my house following my wife around, right? And so this forced me to really take a look at how did we get from where we were to where we are today? What was the process? And what can I do to maximize what I have to help other people? Because that's who I am, right? I'm all about the mission. I'm all about helping people. And so this really impacted me going in that direction.
I love that. So 2 people in your life, 2 pivot people where you've met them and you've made a 180.
There are so many. And there's because I have the mission career and I have the real estate investing in the beginning and now where I'm at now. I would say in the real estate world, there was a guy named Bob Tippett who was the father of one of my best friend's wife. And he was 30 years older than me, and I was a young know-it-all 22-year-old that I've got 8 units or whatever it was, 6 units or whatever at the time. And he just taught me, just like playing golf or whatever, just taught me some lessons, and I just really appreciate it. And the lesson that it stuck with me is he said, keep your portfolio at 50% debt to value. And that way you can weather pretty much any storm from a cash flow standpoint, from a valuation standpoint. And I've by and large held steady to that, and that's been very valuable for me. The other guy is George Fermanian. You ever heard of him? So George, I don't know, he made $100 million or something developing apartment complexes in San Diego. And he just kind of took me under his wing as well. And I remember one time I called him up and I said, would you mentor me? And he goes, yeah, of course. Which I was blown away that he would be willing to do that, right? And I said, well, here's my portfolio. And he said, way too much equity. So it was the opposite of the other guy, right? And he goes, you gotta sell all this stuff. You gotta sell this too slow. And like I had some 15-year mortgages and all this super conservative stuff. And so I still held true to Bob's advice, but I also got a little more aggressive with what George was telling me. So I would say those two guys.
Isn't that funny how you just get, like, you ask people different advice.
Opposite advice, yeah. And they're both both right.
Yep.
Right.
They're both
yeah,
right.
They're both good.
They're both probably incredibly successful too.
Yeah. Right. Way beyond where I'm at. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. What about a quote? Pivot quote.
So Ronald Reagan had on his desk a little plaque that said, "It can be done." Now, I'm sure there's probably some book somewhere that explains why he had that on his desk, but I just like to imagine why, right? Just imagine, is there anything slower and more ingrained and more bureaucratic than the U.S. government, right? So I can just imagine somebody like him who's wanting to make things happen, who's trying to defeat the Russians, and blah, 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 all this stuff. People coming in one after another. Nope, that's not the way it's done. It can't be done. This can't be done. And I've even in the last month, I've had people tell me to my face, there is no way somebody making minimum wage can become a millionaire. It just can't be done. I'm like, I did it. Yeah. It can be done. And my mission is to help people kind of realize that the unexpected investor, right? You can do it. Let's do it. Let's do it together.
Yeah. The next book you write should be called The Minimum Wage Millionaire.
Ooh. Oh, that's a good title.
That's a good title.
The Minimum
right
Wage Millionaire.
Minimum Wage Millionaire.
Do I have to send you a royalty?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, 12% every month. Thank you.
We're going to move into our next segment,
Yeah.
and it is the past, present, future. So we're going to look at past you, present you, future you.
Okay.
And the first thing that I want to ask is, if you could go back to 20-year-old you and give him advice, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to look at your paycheck and you tell your paycheck what to do, not your paycheck telling you what to do, right? Okay, half of you is to spend, 40 of you is to invest, and 10% is to give away. That's what I would say. And the rest you can figure it out.
Love it. What have you done in the last 12 months that's given you a better life? Could be a habit, action, routine, product you bought.
Well, I'm not only an investor in Open Door Capital.
Thank you.
I'm not only on your podcast, but I am a member of the Better Life Tribe.
That you are?
Yeah.
And your intention journal has probably been the single biggest impact on just my day-to-day disciplines of anything I've ever tried. I'm a goal setter. That's my nature. But I've never gotten so granular and so focused. I've lost 3% body fat since I've started doing that. I'm stronger. I'm faster. I have better cardiovascular strength. I am doing reps on the finance side as well. I'm trying to think bigger and grow my portfolio. The book and the brand and everything that I'm doing, a lot of it has to do with the disciplines that I learned from Mr. Brian Turner.
That's awesome. We're going to put that on the sales page for that journal
okay, good.
right there. This is great. Today's show is sponsored by the Intention Journal. You can get it at biggerpockets.com/store, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
All right. You can send the 12%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just
royalties to you. All right, man.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
Actually, we've got a couple more. But so spoiler alert, you are going to die someday.
Oh, wow. Oh.
Yes, I know. We're going there.
He almost died this morning.
Yeah.
Dude, Wilder just figured that out a couple months ago.
Did people die?
That people die. It was such a sad. My wife
And
called me.
he's
Yeah,
three?
he was 3. He was just turning 4.
Okay.
And he heard about death, and he was like, "Wait, we're gonna die?" And like it was such a shocking moment, and Heather had to like walk him through. Like, Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
Wait, I lost my train of.
You're gonna die someday.
Riley prays every night that I die. Yes, and it's so cute. She wants me to go to heaven and spend time with Jesus because we've told her how amazing that is, and so she prays that I die. And I'm like, I don't want to die though.
Miss me.
Exactly.
That's really funny.
All right, so you're gonna die. We're all gonna die, and I think about my funeral a lot. Like, what are people going to say about me at my funeral? What do you want people to say about you?
I want for people. I think that my biggest mark of success will be how my kids turn out. You know, I remember from the 2016 presidential election. So you had probably the ugliest campaign in modern history, at least. And
Wait till this year.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, each one is the worst. Right?
Yeah, it gets worse every time.
So the moderator of the debate asks both Hillary and Donald Trump, say something nice about the other candidate, which that hadn't. I mean, that fantastic question. I loved that question. And Trump, I think, went first, and he said about Hillary, she's tough. And that's a real compliment coming from Donald Trump because he wants to be Mr. Tough, right? So he recognized her toughness. And she said, Donald Trump has really great children. And I was like, oh, wow. I think that's genuine. I think she really thinks that.
Yeah.
And I think that spoke pretty highly of him. And I want people to see my kids and see that they have done things right. Not everything perfect, obviously, but I want for that to be my legacy. I want for my kids to thrive. I want for them to love their lives. I want for them to be effective in what they're doing and love what they're doing. So that would be my legacy.
I love that. Yeah, one of my thoughts that I say all the time is the best thing I can do in my life is raise my kids well.
Which that's a relatively new concept, surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you got to climb the corporate ladder. You got to make all this money and all this kind of stuff. But no, we need to be parents.
Yeah, I could fail at every single aspect of my life, but if my kids grow up loving Jesus, I won.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
All right, man. What are you excited about? What's coming up?
So the book's coming out February 27th. And, you know, when I first started writing it, I wasn't even sure, am I going to publish this? Or, you know, it was just kind of something for me to do. And it's really grown into a passion. In fact, I'm building a business around it. So I want to help people escape the paycheck to paycheck grind because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
There's a surprisingly simple way, and this is something that Brandon was saying about the book, is it's almost fun when you figure out how to gamify this whole process, right? And so I just want to walk alongside people, and I want to help them do that. I want to make millionaires. I want to make millionaires that have a good focus, right? That they're focused on other people in their lives, and they're focused on giving away what they've been blessed with. So that's what we're doing.
So where can people find you, hear more about you, and order your book when it comes out?
Yeah. So this episode, I think, is coming out on February 26th. When you hear this, you can buy it because it'll be available on February 27th, and it'll show up at your door. So Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, all those different places. You can find out about what we're doing at theunexpectedinvestor.com or on social media at unexpectedinvestor.
Very cool.
Amazing.
Dude, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm excited for people to read this. So
yeah, thank you very
awesome,
much. Appreciate it.
Hey.
Three-way
Three-way bump.
Sorry, I ruined the three-way bump.
Cheers.
We did it.